boy, oh boy, oh boy! Hey RV family, keep it tight. My name is Jay Morris, the review guy, and I'm back again to bring you another video. And in this one, I'm going to be covering the brand new Frank Carter and the Rattlesnakes album entitled End of Suffering. This is the third studio-length album from English punk rock band Frank Carter and the Rattlesnakes, obviously frontmanned by Frank Carter. And up until the release of this album, I'll be completely honest, I was not familiar with this band as they were only formed back in 2015, but I dug my teeth into this album a bit, checked out some of their previous work, and I decided I was going to review it. So for the most part, this was a pretty blind listen at first. Now, I'm sure in the underground there are some great hardcore punk releases, some great punk releases, but this is one of the first this year that I really felt like, wow, I want to check this out. This kind of swept me off my feet just a little bit for some different reasons, good and bad. Can I just say real quick that Frank Carter sounds so much like Tim McIlrath on a lot of these tracks of the punk rock band Rise Against, and that's not bad company to keep. I love him. I love Rise Against a lot. Appeal to Reason is one of my favorite punk albums of all time. Why a Butterfly Can't Love a Spider opens up the track listing in a pretty strong way. The thumping percussion that carries on with these guitars has almost a Texan vibe to it, and Frank's vocals don't really help it not sound like that. His vocals are soaring in the chorus as well as the end. I love the noisy guitar freak out near the end of the track that gets even more noisy and progressively noisy, and then it just explodes and diminishes right just immediately into the original thumping riff. I think it is a nice transition and it doesn't feel forced at all. Definitely hardcore punk inspired at the end with that noisiness, but most of the track has a very alternative rock vibe to it. The hardcore punk vibe at the end is super exuberant and technical and nice, but for the minimalism of the track, they really find a lot of energy and power in that minimalism. Something that a lot of punk rock bands that preceded this band as well as contemporary bands do. Tyrant Lizard King is super groovy. Tom Morello of Rage Against the Machine actually helped with this track of all people, which surprised me considering how new this band is. The dissonant melodies that these guitars do are great. I love the kind of grooviness and wonkiness in the chorus that Tyrant Lizard. It's so descending and catchy and earwormy, and once again, I love the guitar freakouts as the track progresses. Heartbreaker, on the other hand, is a bit more raw punk inspired and probably one of my least favorite, if not my least favorite track on the entire album. The mix is a little bit strange and isn't as densely and thickly populated as the rest of this track listing. It doesn't feel as heavy, and I'm not talking in the instrumentation. The instrumentation and vocals are still there, but it's mixed in such a low-key way that it doesn't pack as much of a punch as these other tracks that do take more of a low-key vibe that I did enjoy quite a bit, and it is a little bit a shame. Not to mention, I think that the chorus on this track doesn't really pop as much as a lot of the others on the album. Crowbar is heavy as all hell with its distorted hardcore punk inspired riffs, and it's a nice contrast to Heartbreaker because it's once again densely populated, the mixing is very heavy and brutal, the instrumental composition is just completely vibrant and in your face. The lyrics can feel a little bit preachy, which I'm not a big fan of it because, I don't know, I don't really agree with the messaging of this specific track, but it's punk rock, so I mean, what can you really expect? It has this nice rebellious, visceral nature to it that even if I don't agree with the exact messaging this track is entailing, I can still really get behind just how ferocious this delivery and the instrumentation is. I love the vibrato of his vocals, and I love just how much swagger he has, and especially when he delivers that line leading into the chorus when all the instrumental pauses and just like, go get Crowbar. Reminds me a little bit of what was on that Idols album last year, Joy's an Act of Resistance. Another great punk rock album that I punch myself every day for not covering. Overall, Crowbar is only 2 minutes and 23 seconds, and I wish it was a little bit longer, but the instrumentation is bustling, and I did get behind this track quite a bit. Love Games, I love the introspection of this. I want to read a little bit of lyrics from this, where he opens up the track by saying, I keep sitting down to write this song, but every time I do, all the words come out wrong. And as a musician myself, as someone that, well, I'm not a musician. as someone who makes music as a hobby, I can relate to that quite a bit, because a lot of times music comes from a subjective perspective and something that is coming from the heart, something about an experience you had that may not mean as much to someone else as it does to you, and it's much different from writer's block. Sometimes you just cannot get your thoughts on paper as much as you'd like, and I deal with that as a writer as well. I write a lot as well, but sometimes it's just so hard to just get it down on paper and say, this is what I want. Sometimes you'll have these great ideas or something you want to vent or let out, but you just can't find the way how. The chorus stands out a lot, and it's super emotionally poignant. The subtle pianos on the track are nice as well, but I wish they were a little bit more present in the mix overall. It's a nice track. Anxiety is a kind of brooding, dreary, grunge-inspired alternative rock tune, and his vocals even take on an Eddie Vedder of a Pearl Jam or a Lane Staley of Alice in Chains tone a lot of times, and I must emphasize tone. His vocals don't have that rasping kind of grittiness of a grunge singer, but the tone really does remind me and recall some of those 90s grunge bands, and it is a low-key track, and I wish the instrumentation built a little bit more on the concept of anxiety, because I think in the start of the track, that kind of just lonesome emptiness, devoid of emotion type of feel that it encompasses, that atmosphere. It's really nice, and maybe I'm getting more out of this track than someone will, because I personally do struggle with a lot of anxiety and personal just anxiousness with pretty much everything, and that can manifest in both mental and physical symptoms for me. So the feeling of this track and the atmosphere, this claustrophobic, choking, dreary alternative rock instrumentation, is something that I could get behind so much. I could probably do an entire track review on the track Angel Wings, but this is the one track and one of the first times for any of my album reviews that I'm just gonna say, listen to this track, please, because I can't give it justice. The atmosphere is absolutely amazing. It's immaculate and one of the best atmospheres of a punk rock song in a while, and maybe I'm getting more out of it, but I don't know, it's pretty good. Unfortunately, I know I've been talking very highly about this album, and pretty much every track up until this point besides Heartbreaker, I've said a lot of great things about, but this is where the album can hit a bit of turbulence and expose some of its biggest flaws. Supervillain, Latex Dreams, Kitty Sucker, Little Devil, these 4 tracks leading up to the ending of the album, in my opinion, are very, very base level and kind of expose a pattern that this album is following. Low-key verses that have just kind of a nice, drifty, alternative rock, punk rock inspired feel to them. Usually they'll have soaring choruses, some that pop, some that don't. They'll do noisy guitar freaks out at different points that'll be very distorted and hardcore punk inspired. And in my opinion, these 4 tracks are some of the most forgettable on the entire album, and it's very much a shame. And I'm not writing it off as not being talented. All of these tracks may have like 1 or 2 moments where I'm like, oh yeah, that's pretty good, but for the most part, I just do not want to return to these tracks hardly as much as I want to the others. All of the tracks that preceded these 4 had the same pattern to them and had the same formula to them, but I think they did it more tastefully. I think they had more rip-roaring energy to them, and I could just get behind them more. End of Suffering's hardly what I expected this album to end off with. It is just pretty much 3 things, well, 4 things: vocals, subtle drumming, beautiful pianos, an acoustic guitar. When it first opened it up, I was like, oh, this is gonna be a nice intro, it's gonna pick up the pace, but no, it's the most beautiful track on the entire album, and I like it a lot. It's super emotional. The vocals are mixed to almost a live performance-esque feel to them, and have this like Texan vibe, once again, kind of like on Why a Butterfly Can't Love a Spider. The fade out with the instrumentation is nice at the end, lots of acoustic guitar and beautiful piano going head to head on this track, and while it is not what I expected, I guess it's the type of thing like it's what I needed. Very emotional way to end the album off. So yeah, this album does have a pattern, this has a formula, and it's not the most like just original punk rock or hardcore punk album or alternative rock album you're gonna hear this year by far, and a part of me wishes that Frank had a bit more vocal presence on some of these tracks. There are some duds in the track listing, but not by the standards of just being complete utter crap, but just being a little bit less than the rest of the album with the bar it's set. I liked it a lot. lot. It's the best punk rock album that I've heard this year so far. I'm going to be giving it a 7 out of 10, and that is a wrap. Please stay for the end screen. I'll link some videos that you might be interested in. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe. It will help me out a lot. And like this video if you enjoyed it. Smash that notification bell to be notified of my future uploads. I upload regularly, and I'll talk to you guys next time. But until then, my name is Jay Morse, Review Guy, and I'm signing off saying farewell.